Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays the Day podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lauryn Brunslick, and this is a solo episode. Just me and this mic dancing. You can't see me because this is a podcast, not a YouTube video, but you're missing out. Okay, so I was excited to record this episode because it is a lot of my aha and whoa and takeaway moments from an event that Kirby and I just went to a couple weeks ago called The Vortex. If you follow me on social media, which I think most of you do, if not at She Slays Podcast, I'm way more fun over there than here. Well, not more fun. No, that just made my podcast sound bad. I'm equally as fun. It's the visual to the podcast. Not really. It's just my life. So you probably saw on social media, I digress, that Kirby and I were in Sedona for an event put on by Lona Cook, Stu Bittman, Devin Vrana, and Katina Manning. And it was incredible. Just absolutely incredible. So today is my takeaways from that. And I think that they are going to be powerful for you. And if they're not powerful, then maybe they'll just be slightly, maybe tiny inspirational. Maybe you need to hear it because you weren't there. Most of you. In fact, 99.9% of you listening were not there with me. So it'll be good information for you. Okay. Before we go there, though, you know I have a soapbox. I always have a story or a thing. And today we're going to talk about fertility and sperm and an email I got this morning. All right. That doesn't help you. Okay. So last week on the show, we had Dr. Madeline Turner and we were talking about birth control. In that, around the intro in there, I was talking about how we're having a lot of fertility issues. I think, I don't know the doctor's name, but I shared it again on the podcast, but Joe Rogan had a scientist on. Kirby will put the episode or whatever in the show notes below so you can find it. But so she is the author of a book called The Countdown to Zero or something like that. Kirby will also put that in the show notes. But she is a research person, a scientist who's spent a lot of her life studying phthalates, which is in a lot of plastics and a lot of things in our life, and talking about specifically studying its effect on sperm. And so I just listened to this podcast literally on the way to the Vortex. Kirby and I are just oh my gosh, we are getting rid of plastic. We're looking at the plastic water bottles we're drinking while we're watching this or listening to this episode. And I'm like, oh my God. But then again, also we're done having kids. So who cares about Kirby's sperm? But sorry, Kirb. But where I was going with that is so we just jacked up listening about all this stuff and how Kirby's generation, okay, so he was born in 85, has half as much sperm as his grandpa's generation. And this 2-hour-long podcast is talking, and they're not blaming it all on phthalates. There's tons and tons of different reasons, right? But she brings to light that we have a fertility issue, and there's tons of reasons that we have a fertility issue. But for a moment, because her research is in sperm, she shares that a lot of us women really carry the burden from fertility. A lot of us are now I have not had fertility challenges. The most thing I had was having to wait 7 months before getting pregnant, which was frustrating with our second for sure. But I do not pretend to share in that the way that other women have. And she's talking about how miscarriages, so often it has to do with the fact that the sperm was not carrying the full genetic composition. And so the woman's innate body, and it's just oh my God, the shame and judgment that so many women go through around fertility issues and miscarriages. So anyways, I'm not even to my point yet, you guys. So this is very top of mind. So I'm reading every day. I get 2 email news paraphrase type like things. One's the New Yorker, which, oh my gosh, every time I read it, I just get so mad because it is so non-biased political or news information. Like they're so clearly Democrat that like, and for those who don't know, I'm not a Democrat or a Republican. Don't get your undies in a bundle. I am libertarian. So that means I like a lot of Democrat stuff. I like a lot of Republican stuff. I'm very middle. Actually, I think most America is. But the New Yorker is not. They are very, okay, so that's one that I get. And I get mad when I read that. The other one that I get, and I do know that I do have the choice to unsubscribe. But I haven't found like what I would replace it with because I like having like two different briefings of like what's going on in the world, even though, let's be honest, for the last year and a half, it's only been telling me about how COVID is killing everyone and the vaccine is the saving grace. But the other one I get that I like that tends to be a lot less biased is the Daily Skim. Skim is 2 M's, and I really enjoy it. And I will continue. I'm not going to unsubscribe or like say I'm doing any like major cancel culture, whatever. But today's thing pissed me off. So they are talking, they're bringing to awareness because a lot of people are talking about fertility issues right now for whatever reason, probably because Joe Rogan had someone on his podcast. They don't bring up the scientist or the sperm issue. They just bring up that like last year was one of the lowest fertile years or like productive years of births since 1979, and that it's actually following a trend. And that researcher that I talked about on the Joe Rogan podcast also brought that up, that like, yeah, we're seeing a bad trend of people being able to have babies. And it's not because, like she brought up Singapore, and they're like, people think it's because like in Asian countries, they're being told they can only have one. Like, no, they're legit having trouble. Singapore's having major fertility issues. So in the Daily Skim, I promise this is going somewhere. So they bring up that one of the main reasons, they don't bring up anything about sperm. They don't bring up anything about, toxins in our environment. I don't even know that they really brought up hormones. What they said, experts, air quotes, experts attribute this to is that women, oh my God, are choosing career and therefore choosing to have children later. I'm not done yet. And are choosing not to have children because of the stress of having household chores. Okay. Now, I know sometimes I get a little girl riot, and it's actually been a hot minute since I've like gotten on a like, oh no, you didn't just say that. But yep, that was what the experts say. Why 2020 was one of the worst years for births, or the lowest number of births since 1979, was because, women are just too stressed out about the household chores they would need to do if they had a child. That's cute. That's real cute. So anyways, there we go. There's my soapbox. Let's get back to the vortex. So, okay, before we do that, we're going to do a listener highlight. This listener highlight is actually from a beautiful soul that I met at the Vortex. His name is Simon Erlinson. His wife, Anna, was there too. And they're just great humans. So the highlight says, "Hey, Lauryn, my wife and I listened to 2 of your podcasts about your family and relationship on our way home from Phoenix. You and Kirby are kick ass, and the episodes are super entertaining, and there are actually a ton of nuggets of life info in there. We both loved it. Thank you." Okay. Thank you, Simon, for writing me that note. That just really fills my heart anytime that like somebody gives me positive affirmation that the podcast is helpful. And I love that you took the time. So, thank you. Appreciate it. If you felt, Simon, like going and putting that on Apple Podcasts, that would definitely help more people find the podcast. There are a ton of really great podcasts out there. But we're at 125 reviews so far. And I would love to have more. So please. So let's pray, and then we are going to get into how many takeaways do I have? I have like 8 specific takeaways. Some of them will be short. Some of them will be tangents. I don't know how long this is going to take, folks. But let's pray first. Take a breath. Dear God, thank you so much for the people, specifically the people who you have lit on fire with purpose to inspire the masses. I sometimes get so bogged down in the details of my life, and I start to think small, and I start to feel overwhelmed, and the idea of the ripple effect, like it's out the window. I don't even think about the impact that each adjustment is having and each conversation is having. And sometimes I just get tired. I just get so tired, and that fire within me just starts to dim, and the possibility of what one person can do, starts to weigh really heavy. And so thank you for Devin and Lona and Katina and Stu, those people, and everyone who showed up, hearts open, to connect and be like, all right, this last year has been so hard, but we are chiropractors and we do things different and we see the world different, and we don't have a choice to sit down and get bogged down in the smallness of it all. We're here for a mission. I truly believe, like a weirdo Kool-Aid drinking person, I believe that chiropractic is such a special profession, and that we're here to do some physical work, yes, on our patients, but it goes so much deeper into the mental and the spirit of our patients. So thank you for those reminders. Let me be a conduit to try and eloquently take the inspiration that I got and bring it into the people listening, because 1,000+ people couldn't be there. They wouldn't have fit in the Airbnb. And so let me do it justice. In your name we pray. Amen. And also, sub prayer, let me give credit. Like, none of this is me. This is all inspiration from those amazing humans. So this is not one of those, Lauryn did a great job. Lauryn is repeating other people doing a great job. Okay, so before we jump into my takeaways, let's start with what is the Vortex? So the Vortex, simply put, is 2 things. It is a seminar that was titled The Vortex, but it was located in Sedona, which the people of Sedona refer to the Vortex of Sedona. So a good podcast host would have looked up, by definition, what is Sedona referring to? Instead, I'm just gonna paraphrase what some random hiking guide said to me, to my best memory. So Sedona sits on this geographical special place on Earth. And there's lots of apparently of these vortex places. I don't know if it's that Sedona sits on a crystal quartz or there's something with crystals involved for sure. See, I'm doing a great job already paraphrasing. And there is a increase in positive energy and connection with universal energy in these spots on the Earth that they've found. And so Sedona is one of them. I don't know where other ones are, but there is something geographically special about where the city of Sedona sits. Now, then there's the doubling down effect, is when you have a geography that pulses a higher vibration than other, like New York or whatever, the middle of North Dakota, when there is a special vibration, people who tend to be more in tune with that love and higher energy tend to flock there and then raise that energy even more. So that's all to say, Sedona is special and full of a whole bunch of love and high vibing people. And it's a cool place. It's a very cool place to come. It feels different. It looks different. It is very different than what most of us are used to on a day-to-day basis, for sure. So if you haven't been to Sedona, I recommend it. You don't need there to be a special seminar called the Vortex to go and experience the Vortex. It's there all the time. So, but the seminar, like I said, was held by Devin Vrana, Lona Cook, Stu Bittman, and Katina Manning. This was my first time spending any amount of extensive time with Stu. I had heard him speak before at Devin's The Big Idea conference that she holds in her hometown. And Lona, Lona Cook is an amazing human. Both Devin and Lona have been guests on the podcast before. Lona and I have known each other for 11 plus years now and only live about 45 minutes away from each other and are just like, she's just one of my girl gang people for sure. And now after this weekend, Devin Vrana is for sure in my girl gang too. If you guys don't know, I'm building a girl gang. So I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to fuck shit up. Sorry if there are kids listening. Sorry, that was aggressive. But Stu, oh my gosh, Stu Bittman is like possibly the closest thing I've met to Jesus, Jesus energy besides Simon Floriani. Also amazing human. Simon wasn't there. That's just the other person I've met in real life that I'm like, what energy or vibrational state are your cells vibrating at? Because you are just emitting white light and love. It is insane. Which is exciting when I get to a sub point. When I finally get around to one of my points, I'll tell you extra why that's exciting that I see that in them. And Katina Manning is just, I think she said she's 64. She is just the most authentic person. She is just so herself, which is so great as someone who really struggles with showing up authentically as myself, to see that in someone and be like, wow, you are just so you. And you are, again, just those four humans. They're pure white light and love. So really cool people. Pay attention to social media and go do something that they are doing. The people there were really cool because, you know, the type of people who are attracted to something like that are showing up at a certain level themselves, you know, ready to evolve, ready to be more loving, to just, you know, even though they say like, oh, I was just curious. It's like, no, you were drawn to this for a reason. So very cool people. One of them, his name is Paul, and he obviously listens to the podcast. Okay, so he's a student. I think he's starting his 4th trimester at Life. One of those people, you meet people and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm speaking more woo-woo. It's because I came back from Sedona and I'm a changed person. You meet someone and they're just like, aura is big. And you're just like, you know, it's not that they have the wisdom of someone old, but you're just like, you are special. There's something special. You're going to do really cool things. He is one of those people. And so when Kirby and I were we're getting to the house, this big house that we're at, and we're introducing ourselves, and I'm like, I'm Lauryn, and Kirby's like, I'm Kirby, and he said it just like that. And Paul goes, wait, what were your names? So we repeat our name, and he goes, can you say something again? I'm sorry, your voices sound really familiar. And I just kind of laughed, and I'm like, have you listened to Sheslays the Day podcast? And he's like, oh my God, that's totally where I hear it from. And I'm like, it's a funny thing. I don't know that I've had someone say, wait a minute, talk again. Your voice sounds familiar. But weird stuff like that keeps happening. And I go to more chiropractic seminars. People are like, wait a minute, I think I know you. And then I'm like, I'm so sorry. I have no idea who you are. But they know all these weird stories about my life. It's a very intimate thing. It's kind of weird. But anyways, Paul was special. Where were we? Okay. So you know what the Vortex is. You know what Sedona is now. So I'm just going to kind of go into some of my biggest takeaways that I want to share with you. They're not really in any order. I wish that they were, but they're not. They're actually in the order that they were in my notebook. So there you go. There's an order. So the first one, I'm going to try and attribute each of these to where credit is due, but I might just, not do as good of a job as I want. But I know the first one is from Lona Cook. So Lona is, oh my gosh, she's just great. She talks a lot about manifestation. If you haven't read the book Power Over Force, on her behalf, I will tell you, you need to read it. It's definitely one of those books that makes you completely flip your thinking on emotions and vibrational energy on its head. Scientifically based, but like some Joe Dispenza shit for sure. So one of the things that she talked about is she talks about financial abundance a lot. And when she's talking about manifestation, and one of the things she talked about is like, you know, money is just an energy and what you can vision, and it's in tens. And so like if you can, you know, think of $10, you can think of $100. Can you vision $1,000? Can you imagine $10,000? Can you know, hold on to the energy that $100,000 have? Can you hold on to the energy that $1 million has? Can you think in millions? Can you think in 10 millions? Can you think in hundreds of millions? And, you know, I don't know. I'm probably going to say this too many times during this, but I don't know if that hit with you the way it did with me, that when she was talking about it, you know, I was like, yes, I can picture $1,000. Yes, I can picture $10,000. I have no, like $100,000. But when she talked about $1 million, I felt like I could. But then as soon as she said like, okay, can you think of the energy and hold on to the energy of $100 or $10 million? It was like, no. Nope. My brain instantly went like, oh, no. That kind of wealth isn't for me in this lifetime. And I was just like, oh, interesting that you showed up here. Hello, little subconscious thought that's holding you back. But like, yeah, I was like, no. I mean, I have just written off that I will not be a tens of millionaire. Like, you know, I can aspire to that $1 million thing. Like I can see that. I can like, yep. But yeah, no, there's not a place in my brain that Lauryn is tens of millions of dollars in wealth, or, you know, all the like stuff you own or whatever, you know, like I can't picture it. And so that is an exercise that I want to spend time with Kirby doing. You know, she talks about like one of the first steps is knowing what you would do with the money. And if you don't know what you would do with it, you're not going to manifest it in. And so, you know, like play around with like, would you start a nonprofit? Would you pay off all your debt first? Would you, you know, pay off your parents' house? Would you, you know, what would you do with it? What would you do with that money if it came into your life? And start really preparing for that. Because if you don't have space for it, if I am literally telling the universe, oh, no, not in this lifetime, I'm not going to be a millionaire. Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess I could like stumble into becoming a tens of $1 million, but through Dogecoin, but you know, whatever. I believe that yes, money is energy, and that it's a transaction, and you need to have your mind right about it. There you go. Okay. So point 2 is that we should all over ourselves all the time. This is something from Stu Bittman, and he talked about, you know, how often we are saying should. I should work out. I should do this. I should do that. I should. And we verbalize it a lot, and we also really, really subconsciously say it. And what his recommendation is instead of saying, I should work out, I should be seeing more people, I should spend more time with my family, I should go to church, I should, is replace that with I choose to. Now, Kirby and I had a conversation about this because I said, like, you know, I struggle with what about the things I'm not doing? So what if it's like, I should have a better morning routine? I don't know if Stu would agree with taking what he said, but like, this is kind of what I would apply it to of if I am choosing to sleep in instead of waking up early to have a healthy morning routine, instead of saying, I really should wake up earlier, but it's just hard to get out of bed. Saying like, at this moment in my life, at this season in my life, I am choosing to prioritize sleep. Now, if that doesn't feel right, like if you're waking up and you are waking up early, but you're spending your time on social media, then you're going to go, I am choosing to spend time on social media instead of a morning routine. Now, that feels different, doesn't it? Right? And it's like, so then you might need to sit with that. But what happens when we should is it's almost like we feel like we get credit for knowing that there's a healthier option. So it's kind of like being like, I know, I'm supposed to do this other thing. And so like we give ourselves almost we feel like we get a little credit. But when you are, I don't want to say forced, but when you go, I choose to spend my time on social media in the morning instead of doing yoga, working out, or meditating. It's kind of like, oh, well, you don't get credit for, like, you're like, oh, I know I should do something else. Well, it's like, no. You see how that like cycle goes where when you don't allow yourself to say should, and you go, no, you're making a conscious choice. And that's okay. But like, be conscious that is a conscious choice. And if it doesn't feel right, what are you going to change? Sit with that discomfort and make a small baby step in the direction that you want to. Don't go like, well, I'm meditating for 5 minutes, but I should be meditating for longer, right? Like this no, this didn't come from the Vortex, but it came from a podcast episode that I listened to afterwards with Jay Shetty, where he was talking about balancing ambition and like being content. And he talks about, we all talk about like the maximum, right? Like I should work out 30 to 60 minutes every day. I should eat more, 15 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. And we all aspire to these like maximums. And he says, like, focus on the minimums. So like, look at yourself and what do you need in order to be a healthy, basic human, and start there. So for me, here's an example. As I realized that the minimum I need to do in order to feel good about having moved my body is 20 minutes. Now, I would prefer a 45 to 60 minute workout, but I don't always have time for that. But since I anchor to 60 minutes being what a workout is, if I don't have 60 minutes to work out, guess what happens? I don't work out. And so instead going like, okay, what is the minimum? Maybe for you, it's 10 minutes. So I don't do yoga. I wish I did yoga, but like, I just kind of keep avoiding it and being like, because in my brain, right, in order to call it yoga, I need to do it for 45 to 60 minutes. But instead I go like, okay, what's the minimum that you could do? And if I need to not call it yoga and I need to call it like guided stretching, whatever. And it's like, 10 minutes would be a really good start for me. I would feel good if I just made the conscious choice to move my body for 10 minutes and call it yoga. Like that's a really good minimum. And that seems really attainable. So focus on those minimums. If you're having a hard time going like, I know I need to stop saying should, but like I'm having a hard time getting to that next level, start focusing on the minimums instead of like the maximum of what you could be doing. That's a better way. I could be working out more in the morning instead of shoulding. Okay. Next kind of aha was, again by Stu, is we did a look into each other's eyes exercise. Isn't that a song? I was about to sing and then I'm like, nope, not gonna do that. So this is an exercise that I had heard or Kirby brought up from some book he was reading, I don't know, a couple years ago about like just connecting with intimacy. And you sat and we looked into each other's eyes, and Kirby had recommended this a long time ago. We only tried it once and it was awkward, but it was then also kind of great. And then we never did it again because we forgot, I guess. But a lot of people at the Vortex were not complete strangers, but were not married and did the same exercise. And people were just like tearing up. But what it is it was this acknowledgement of looking at the other person. And Stu went through all of these statements of just like, you are me and I am you. I acknowledge that you are also trying to do your best. And I acknowledge that you are also trying to be the best version of yourself that you can, and that sometimes you stumble and that you harshly judge your own self and that you are trying to show up. Like, it was just really an empathizing moment tied to kind of like the next aha is that when you, like, we talk about love, right? We throw around like we're supposed to love each other and we're supposed to love humans and all of this. And Devin was talking about how if you want to explode your practice, just go home and love on your employees and love on the people in your community. And then Stu kind of followed it up with like, love is not an intense liking. It's a realization that we are all the same. We are all connected, as in just a bucket or cup of water. If you scoop it out of the ocean, is it no longer the ocean? Like, no. So like, we as humans are just cups of water in the ocean. And it's so hard because we get so focused on ourselves and our own problems. And we're just like really judgmental of other people. And like, I can't believe they didn't show up for their appointment. And like, gosh, that person is such a jerk. And like, every single person, you see this in all the like, be kind to one another because you have no idea what the other person is going through. Here's the deal. You do know what the other person's going through. Take a mirror and look back at yourself and all of the same shit and lies and judgment that you are going through. That woman is also going through that. That business owner is also going through that. That patient who you have a narrative about how they just don't value care and this was the wrong decision, they are going through so many of the same things that if you even knew, like if you were them, like you'd be dealing with the same things. And it's just mind-blowing to think of other humans in that way of like, okay, to love you does not mean that I need to like you a lot. Those are what your best friends are for. But to love your enemy, to love someone who you really don't want to spend time with, this is how it's possible. It's by not viewing them like somebody you want to spend a bunch of time with, but going like, you and I are both humans on this earth, just playing with the deck of cards we were dealt. And I was dealt a different deck of cards than you were. And I have no idea how I would play your hand. But I know that we share basic human instincts to seek connection. And we share basic human instincts to really shame and should all over ourselves and feel embarrassed that we are not enough. We share basic human instincts that we easily get separated from ourselves and that we want to become better people. But gosh, damn, it is so hard. And that we want to be better each day, but we fall into the same treadmill of more and more, and I'm not enough, and this is going to fulfill me, and all of the judge that does. And so that's what it means to love on your enemies, to love on your patients, is to see them as a part of you and dealing with the same shit. Okay, next one is, this one is kind of more an evolution of conversation and thought from an exercise from it that Kirby and I had. And so I feel like Glennon Doyle talks about, so in her book, Untamed, oh my gosh, so good. If you haven't read that, go read that, please. She talks about this bridge and there's an island and you're not allowed on my island unless this. Otherwise, people talk about like drawing a bubble and write things that are allowed, like you're the bubble, I guess, or I don't know, what you're allowing into your environment, you're writing inside the bubble. And then what you are not allowing into your environment is outside the bubble. And so it's this exercise, either way, whether you do the Glennon Doyle version or the bubble version, where it's like this is the boundary and this is what I'm not going to allow into my life. Now, here's what I'll say around the exercises. I do think it's worth doing, but because it does bring awareness around like, gosh, I really just let toxicity into my life through going on Facebook. I really just let negativity into my life by watching the news. So it's a good exercise to being like, if you take it one step further and going like, okay, you don't want toxicity or negativity in your life. How is that showing up and what can you easily like draw a line in the sand and say no more? That's the line of the bubble, right? And I do think that there are some things that you can it's black and white. If you don't want that in your life, cut it out. But here's where Kirby and I kind of took the conversation a little deeper with ourselves, is going like, it's not that easy all the time. It's really not, because it's one thing to say, I'm not going to allow negativity in my life. And then you're like, yeah, I wrote negativity outside the bubble and only joy and happiness inside the bubble. And then you show up to work and you get a new patient and they didn't get the whole bubble exercise. They were not aware that they were not allowed to come into your bubble because they're in your bubble. They are in your new patient room talking to you. Guess what? You can pretend like you can draw a bubble around yourself, but they're in your bubble because they're in your life. And I get that there's a difference between observing and being around negativity and not allowing it to absorb. That's a really good thing of like, yeah, but sometimes, okay, let's say you say like, no, negative patient, you're not in my life. Okay, well, what if it's your spouse? What if your spouse is dealing with some depression and they are not? Kirby's not, by the way, just like, this is just an example. But he has, and like, what if it is your spouse? What if it is your kids that are the thing that you said you're not going to allow into your bubble? What if it's your mom? What if it's, so I think that for some things, yes, the exercise step one is figuring out awareness around what do you want to allow in? What do you not want to allow in? What things can you easily cut that's just like, bye, you're not in my life anymore? Then take it a step further and going like, okay, where are the ways that this is showing up in my life that it's not just black and white, that there is gray area? And how do I do this bubble exercise when negativity is showing up for someone that I don't want outside the bubble, for somebody who is carrying their negativity onto my island and I deeply care about them and I'm going to sit with them in that? It's not going to be by being like, no, we're happy. You should be joy. There's only joy in the bubble. Like that's kind of the Power Over Force book that Lona talks about, where it's like, you can't bring someone from negativity up to joy. It's too far of a vibrational leap. You have to bring them up to the next level, which may be, something different. But like, it's just acknowledging that there's a gray area. And I love the exercises that we talk about. Like I said, it brings awareness, but don't fool yourself into thinking that it is that easy to just draw a circle and go, you're in or you're out. A lot of things carry gray area. And why I think it's important to go further is if you don't go deeper into the like, yeah, but there's gray, you're just going to feel like a failure a couple days after you did the bubble exercise. And you're like, shoot, I let negativity in, or I should it all over myself. And I said I wasn't going to allow the word should into my bubble. And like, so all comes back to granting yourself grace. Like, and where I think we really harp on ourselves more than anyone else is when we set up unrealistic expectations, or we think about things a little too simply. We think, well, for everyone else, all they need to do is draw a line in the sand. What's wrong with me that the line in the sand thing isn't working? I'm telling you, it's because it's more complicated, because people are people and they're not emotions. And so a lot of times what we like to say is like, I'm not allowing you into, or like this emotion into my bubble. But what happens when the person carrying the emotion is someone I want in my bubble? So it's complicated. Let's just say that. Okay. What is the next thing that I told you? These were like in no order at all. Okay, so this one is from Katina, and she kept saying like the ABCs. So there's awareness, drawing awareness to what is going on. And I'll tell you kind of like why this is so important to me. The second step is to breathe, to just take a breath. And then C is to realize that you have a conscious choice to then act or speak or do something. So here's why this was super important, or like really hit with me, is that I deal with people pleasing. A lot of people deal with people pleasing. How it shows up for me though is in like I have the awareness state. Like I am constantly aware of conversations that I'm having with people, and like, how am I, and like predicting and thinking like, okay, how am I supposed, when they stop talking, what should I say? What kind of emotion are they looking for me to match them with? What do they need from me right now in order for them to be happy with this interaction and therefore like me? And, she asked me something. She said like, when we were talking about this, I said like, I have so much anxiety around wanting to show up as my authentic self, but I feel like I can't because I'm too much. Sometimes, I say the wrong thing and I do this. And she said, do you trust yourself? And I said, in what situation? Which was the wrong answer, by the way. She laughed and it's kind of like, no, that is your answer. And so, we dug deeper, and she's just like, what is it that you don't trust? You need to think about that. And so for me, for everyone, I believe it's probably different, but for me, it's my impulsivity, right? Like, I don't trust that I'm not going to say something without thinking, without checking in of like, is that kind? Is that true? And I impulsively react. I just move really quickly and I talk really quickly. And I just go. And she's like, I believe that if you insert, you're very aware, and I don't think you feel like you're making a conscious choice. You feel like you need to make a strategic choice. But instead, if you view that awareness as something that we all do, like that was nice where I'm like, oh, okay, everybody is like doing that. Everybody's having that conversation in their head of like, how am I, what is happening? How am I supposed to react to this? She's like, if you can trust yourself and slow down, even just for a second in your brain, be aware, take a breath and check in with your true self, your inner self, then that choice, that the thing you're going to say, the emotion you're going to do, like the action that you're going to do, is going to come from a part of you that you do trust, not that impulsive person who's like needing to like do this and act really quickly and respond quickly and get the laugh and do this. Like if you just insert that breath, then it does become aware, breath, conscious, connected, true choice of the emotion, the action, the phrasing. And that was just like this missing piece for me of like, I've spent so much of my life bouncing from A to C and skipping over the breath, skipping over the B, just going aware, choice, aware, and then like, this is what I need to do. And it's just like, oh, if I just in my head, even, it's not even like taking more time of just like learning to be present in that breath and go, okay, I am here with this human across from me, what does this person need? And not think about it like, oh man, I'm not showing up as my authentic self. It's like, no, you're showing up as your present true self. What does your present true self want to say to this person across from you? Take a breath. What does this present true authentic self want to take action on this next thing? But you got to insert the breath. Okay, last one. Okay, hold on. Yep, I covered that. Devin says if you want to grow your practice, you got to love. You also need to breathe. Oh, sub point to that. This is just kind of one of those, like, I don't need to go on a big tangent on it because like I feel like we've all heard this before, but here's your reminder. You are not responsible for the thoughts and actions and emotions of another person. Now, this doesn't mean, like, I feel like I've had this conversation with my children, but like just needed to hear it as an adult again. It is important to be kind to people, but be very aware, and red flags should go up in your brain anytime someone says, you made me mad. You made me cry. You made me feel like I'm not important. And to me, my brain automatically, right, without the breath, goes like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to make you feel that way. Like, what I meant was this. And I just right, go into all of this, like, shame. I'm such a jerk for making that person feel that way. And I'm not saying that if someone says that to you, you don't go like, oh, I'm sorry that you were hurting right now. And you don't need to say this next part. Like, you can just say that part, but in your head, realize that you did not make them feel that way. Okay? This is a big thing for me and a lot of people pleasers is like, we view this like, oh, but I do feel bad that they got mad because I didn't mean it that way. Or I do feel bad that they cried. I didn't want to make them cry. Very few people are walking around going, yes, goal, check, made you cry. But then we get confused that it's our fault. And that is where I think the thought, like the energy needs to go into like, no. If you're like looking to be like a recovering people pleaser, I believe that one of the first steps is sitting in your breath when somebody says one of those statements to you and going like, I didn't make them cry. There was something in them that responded to what I did that they made themselves cry. And that sounds so mean, doesn't it? And so that's where it's like, I'm not saying don't say sorry. In fact, I encourage you to say, I'm so sorry that you felt that way, that what I did caused you to feel that. I don't want you hurt. But realize they're carrying their own shit. And everybody is going through and like life very, I don't want to say self-centered, but we are innately egocentric. And everybody's carrying their own baggage and their own stories. And so it's like, oh, no. I didn't make you cry. Your lack of self-worth made you cry. Your X, Y, or Z made you cry. I just triggered that in you. Again, don't say any of that shit to someone. That's just mean. Like, oh no, girl, the fact that you don't love yourself is why you cried. That's just mean. But in your head, you can be thinking that of like, oh, that's too bad. That's not my fault. She feels that way. It's not my fault. He feels that way. It's not my fault that patient is mad at me. I triggered just by me being me something in them. And that's not my responsibility to carry all of their burden and baggage and weight and try and act and say all the right things to go through my life, not triggering every single person around me. We are kind. Most of us listening are very, very kind, loving people. And so if you take a breath for a moment, like, yes, are we going to mess up? For sure. But like, we're not going around trying to trigger people. And so carrying the guilt that happens with that isn't fair to yourself. Okay. Last thing that I'm going to say. So remember in the beginning that I said that Stu Bittman and Simon Floriani are two of the most like just the white light and pure energy. Same with Devin and Lona, that I see in them that you're just like, whoa, you are special. You are love. You are white light. This is a combination of the book, What the Mystics Know by Richard Rohr, that I was reading while I was there, and things that Devin said, and things that Stu said, and things that Katina said. So I'm going to paraphrase everything, but basically, think of someone you admire, okay? Like really admire, whether it's in this profession, maybe you admire the way they mom or dad, maybe it's the way somebody's a friend. And think about the things, really think about the things you admire about them. It is impossible for you to see something in someone else that does not exist in you. Now, unfortunately, this goes both ways. We've heard, like, goes the negative way too, where like a lot of times where you're just like, oh, she bothers me because she like thinks she's all that and blah, 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 blah. Like a lot of books and therapy would go, the things that trigger us most about other people tend to be like stuff that we're working on our own, or like maybe don't love about ourselves or whatever. So we're not going to focus on the negative part. We're going to focus, because nobody talks about this positive aspect, right? We've heard about that negative part of like, oh, if you don't like it in them, it's probably in you. And you're like, shit, am I a jerk? But the positive aspect of that is you cannot acknowledge something good in someone else unless it has existed at one point in you, unless it lives inside of you. Otherwise, you can't see it in other people. Like you're unable, and I can't explain the, like, for those of you who are like, are you sure? Like, how do you know that? I'm like, I don't know. Just, this is what people say. Smart people say. Richard Rohr, he's a very smart guy. And like, this is what like energy, mystical, innate healers, loving people say of like, that is how it works. Okay, so we're just going to have to trust them. Don't trust me, trust them. Trust the smarter, innate people. That like, if you see someone and you see something good, instead of comparing yourself, instead of going, I wish that I could be like that person, smile and go, that lives in me. And it may not show up like, am I going to, I think about the people I really admire in this profession and in this world, and like, am I going to be them? No, I've tried before. It doesn't work. Like, there are some people who just like carry this, like the way they talk, they're just so calming. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could be like that. And then I like try and imitate that, and like it lasts for about 5 seconds, and this is not my energy. My energy is fire. And like, I cannot pretend to be that different energy, but that does exist in me. And where it shows up, is when I'm with my children, and they need me to be that. I'm not going to be that all the time. I'm not going to be that on stage. I'm not going to be that on a podcast, but it does exist in me. And I can tell you specifically where that shows up. It shows up when my children need me to be that calming, loving, pure light for them. I show up like that. That exists in me. And that's because I love them. So now if I kind of take it all together, and what if I can start widening the circle of people that I love, right? Like, I love my children. I love my best friends. I love my mom and dad. I love my in-laws. I love, my husband. I love like all these people I love, right? What if I can just try and blow that circle out one tiny ring bigger, okay? Like a tree that every year gets like another ring, right? Like, what if I don't try and think about the big thing, the big picture of like, I just wish I could love all of my patients and every person that I come into interaction with. This is too big. Maybe you can. It's too big for me. I just get frustrated that I'm a jerk. So, but what if I said like, and guess what, Lauryn, you've got a year to open that. You don't need to do it over the course of a weekend. You don't need to change. Let's just set our expectations a little smaller. What if I gave myself a year just to widen my circle just one little ring and to include just a couple more people in that circle of love, that I'm able to show up for them with that pure, because when I believe when I show up for my children in that essence, not all the time, people, but in that essence, that's that white love. That's that white energy. And so showing up for everyone like that, that's a big job. I don't know, but I'm only 34 and I think I have a long life ahead of me. And what if I can just focus on expanding that white love, just one little layer, and give myself time. If I think just one step at a time, one ring at a time, what kind of 40-year-old will I be? How much white love and light can I send out into the world 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? So it does exist in me. And so that's awesome that I see it in other people. And I believe it exists in you too. I mean, I don't know you. I know some of you, but I don't know all of you. But if you are like me and you are able to think of someone who just is love, maybe you've never met them in real life. Maybe you've only listened to them. You've seen them. You've observed them from afar. If you can think of anyone that you've ever experienced in this world that is that love, it's in you. It may be a little baby seed right now, and that is okay. Nurture it, love the love, and stop beating yourself up that you're not that person, because you are. You are. You just need to start shifting some of that language, start shifting some of that grace, start shifting how you see other people, and just be gentle. So those are my takeaways. For those of you still listening who didn't get bored, hopefully you're still listening, because I think towards the end, that was the good stuff, right? I would love for you guys to pay attention to those humans who put together the Vortex. Get yourself to their seminars. Somebody else who comes to mind is Dr. Mo and Dr. Tamara McIntyre. Their Prana Foundation seminars, get yourself there. Brett Jones and Kate Jones, I haven't been to one of those, but I have, there's just these people that are doing cool freaking stuff in our profession. And you don't have to be a chiropractor, okay? I guarantee you, if you know these people and you see them putting out a seminar, send them a message and say, hey, I'm not a chiropractor, but I'm feeling drawn to this. Listen to the universe kind of pulling you to those things, because there are cool people who are changing the freaking world, and it starts with you showing up and letting them shift your energy just a little bit. So if you liked this episode, screenshot it, share it with people on social media, write a review. It would just mean the world to me. And until next week, She Slayers, I love you. Bye.